Okay, think back to when you were a kid. What was the dream job?
Huh.
Rock star,
Yeah,
detective, maybe, something a little more grounded, but still exciting.
definitely. It's funny how the path to actually paying the bills can sometimes look, well, very different from those early dreams, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And for you, our listener, the learner, someone who wants to get that essential knowledge uh, without getting lost in the weeds, we're tackling a concept today that could really shift how you see your financial life.
Absolutely. You brought Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant to our attention, and it's a brilliant framework.
It really
It
is.
essentially maps out the four primary ways people earn money. And what's powerful about this isn't just the labels, it's the underlying mindsets and how those impact your ability to build wealth.
Exactly. Kiyosaki lays it out with four categories. Employee, that's E, self-employed, S, business owner, B, and investor, I. So our goal in this deep dive is to really kind of get under the skin of each of these,
Hmm.
pull out the key insights that are going to be most useful for, your financial understanding.
And maybe spark some new ways of thinking about your own income generation.
Right. Because we're not just talking about job titles here. We're talking about fundamentally different approaches to money.
Okay, so let's dive into the left side of the quadrant first. The employee and the self-employed.
That's good.
The employee or E quadrant is where most of us start, and it's pretty straightforward. You work for someone, a company, a boss, and you get a regular paycheck.
Right. And as Kiyosaki emphasizes, this is often the sort of default setting we're given. Think about it. Go to school, get a good job.
That whole script.
Exactly. His own father's career as a government employee really exemplified this. The focus is often on security, right? Having that reliable income, the benefit.
Yeah, security is the big driver there.
But the key insight here, and this is important, is the trade-off. That security can sometimes limit your potential for, like, significant wealth growth and control over your financial destiny.
Absolutely. Even someone really high up, like a company president or CEO, they're still technically in this E quadrant. They're trading their expertise and time for a salary from the company. It's an employer-employee contract.
That's a great point. Okay, so then the self-employed, the S quadrant.
Right. This is where people decide they want to call the shots, be their own boss, and have a direct connection between their effort and what they earn.
The do-it-yourselfers.
Exactly. They're often highly skilled, maybe specialists, and they really value their independence. They often dislike having their income dependent on others.
hmm And the crucial insight here is that the S quadrant often means you've just traded one boss for, well, potentially hundreds of customers or clients.
That's it. Your income is still directly tied to your personal time and effort. If you don't work, you don't get paid. Simple as that.
It's interesting how Kiyosaki frames the motivation, where an employee might be driven by fear of not having enough and seeks safety.
Yeah, the security blanket.
The self-employed person often reacts to that same fear by wanting control. They want to be the one in charge of their income.
It's a different response to the same underlying emotion, often fear.
But here's a really important point, one that often trips people up, right? Many who dream of building a big business, a B-type business, they end up accidentally creating an S-type gig instead.
Oh, absolutely. That's a super common pitfall. It's the difference between working in your business versus working on your business.
Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. Think of someone who makes amazing hamburgers, better than McDonald's, maybe.
Okay.
In the S quadrant, they're the cook, the cashier, maybe the delivery person. The business totally relies on their personal skills and time. They are the business.
Right. If they get sick, the business stops.
Exactly. Now, imagine someone who owns a chain of burger joints. They've built systems for cooking, for ordering, for hiring. They've got staff. Their income isn't solely dependent on them personally flipping burgers.
They own the system.
They own the system. That's the shift from S to B.
Uh-huh.
It's not about making the best hamburger necessarily, but building the best system for delivering hamburgers.
Got it. So looking at that left side, E and S, what's the sort of common thread linking them?
Well, traditionally, our education system primarily prepares us for these two ways of earning a living. That's the path most people are taught.
Go to school, get a job, or become a highly paid professional like a doctor or lawyer, which is often S.
Exactly. And financially, a key aspect is how income is taxed. In
hmm
both the E and S quadrants, your income is generally taxed before you can deduct many expenses.
Right. Pay taxes first, then spend what's left.
which can, hinder wealth accumulation over the long term. Kiyosaki argues that while you can certainly make a comfortable living on the left side, achieving significant long-term financial freedom solely within these E and S quadrants, well, it's tough. It's seldom found there.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's pivot then to the right side, the business owner, B, and the investor. What's the fundamental difference here?
Okay, the core of the B quadrant, the business owner, is owning a system that generates income. And ideally, crucially, one that can run without your constant day-to-day presence.
That's the big leap from S, isn't it?
It's the crucial distinction. A true B business has systems, processes, and requires the ability to effectively lead and manage people to operate those systems.
So the insight is you've moved from being the key employee, maybe the best employee,
To being the orchestrator. You own and control a revenue-generating machine.
That reminds me of that analogy Kiyosaki uses, Ed the bucket carrier versus Bill the pipeline builder.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Ed had to physically haul buckets of water every single day to earn money. Direct effort for direct pay.
Classic S quadrant. Or even E, depending on how it's set up.
But Bill, on the other hand, he took the time, the effort up front to build a pipeline.
Right. Hard work initially.
But once it was built, the water flowed and the income followed with much less direct ongoing effort from him.
That perfectly illustrates the difference between the S and B mindsets. Building an asset, the pipeline that works for you.
So how does one build a B business? Are there different ways?
Yeah, Kiyosaki outlines 3 main paths. First, you could start your own traditional corporation, like a C Corp, where you develop your own unique system from scratch. That's often the hardest.
Okay.
Second, you could buy a franchise. There, you're essentially buying a proven existing system. Think McDonald's again.
You get the playbook.
Exactly. You get the playbook, the brand, the training. Less risky in some ways, but you have less control and ongoing fees. And third, he mentions network marketing, where you plug into an existing distribution system and build your own network within it. Interesting. But regardless of the route, the focus is always on the system's ability to generate income, not just your individual skill.
Precisely. The system is king in the B quadrant. It's the replicable, scalable system that creates the wealth, often more so than the specific product or service itself.
Okay. And then finally, we arrive at the investor, the I quadrant. This is where your money starts to have its own job.
That's a great way to put it, exactly. In the I quadrant, the fundamental principle is that your money works for you. Your assets generate income.
Assets generating income.
And Kiyosaki makes a really critical distinction here between being rich, which he defines as having a high income, maybe from an E or S job,
Lots of money coming in.
and being wealthy. Wealthy is when your passive income from your assets consistently exceeds your expenses. You don't need to work for money anymore.
Ah, okay. So the aim in the I quadrant is to build a portfolio of income-producing assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, businesses you invest in that eventually gets you to that state of wealth, of financial freedom.
That's the goal.
So even if someone achieves a really high salary as an employee, say a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO, moving into the investor quadrant is often necessary to build that lasting financial security, especially thinking about retirement.
Absolutely essential, in his view. And there can also be significant tax advantages in the I quadrant. How income generated from assets is taxed is often different, sometimes much more favorably, than income earned through direct labor in the E or S quadrants.
Making money in the asset column, as he puts it.
Right. Kiyosaki also talks about different levels of investors, too. It's not just one thing. There are like 5 levels he describes.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, level 0 is basically someone with 0 financial intelligence, maybe deep in debt. Level 1 is savers, just putting money aside. Level 2, he calls investors too busy. They might hand money over to advisors. Level 3 are the do-it-yourselfers, more active but maybe unfocused. Level 4 are professional investors. And level 5 are the capitalists, creating investment.
Wow. Okay, so it's a journey of learning.
Definitely. A key takeaway is that financial intelligence grows over time with experience and, importantly, education.
He also raises a point that might surprise some people. That simply saving money, like the level 1 investor, might not be the most effective long-term strategy today. Why does he say that?
Well, he points back to 1971 when the US dollar came off the gold standard.
Okay, Nixon.
Right. That fundamentally changed the nature of money, in his view. Since then, governments have had more flexibility to print money, which leads to inflation.
The money you save buys less over time.
Exactly. Inflation gradually erodes the purchasing power of your savings. He even mentions how the dollar lost something like, 95% of its value against gold since that shift. So, while saving is important as a starting point, relying solely on savings for long-term financial security can be really risky in an inflationary world. Money needs to be put to work, invested.
And that ties into his caution about just handing money over to advisors without understanding it yourself, like the level 2 investor.
Precisely. He stresses the importance of developing your own financial understanding, your own financial IQ, rather than blindly trusting others with your financial future. You need to be able to assess the advice you're given.
So bringing it together, what are the common threads that tie the business owner and investor quadrants together on that right side?
The central theme is building or acquiring assets, things that put money into your pocket, whether you work actively or not.
Okay, focus on assets.
Right. And because of that focus, there's a much greater potential for significant financial freedom and long-term security compared to the left side. However,
There's always a however.
haha, yeah.
Yeah.
The skills required for success over here, things like reading financial statements, understanding market cycles, managing risk effectively, leading people, these are often not taught in traditional schools.
But those you have to seek out.
You do. And instead of avoiding risk, like many on the left side are conditioned to do, the focus on the right side shifts to understanding and strategically managing risk.
This whole framework, it sounds like it requires more than just, changing your job title. It feels like a real shift in mindset is needed.
That's a crucial insight, absolutely. Moving between quadrants, particularly making that jump from the left side, ERS, to the right side, B or I, isn't just about getting a new business card.
Right.
It demands significant mental, emotional, and he even says spiritual evolution. It's about changing how you think and who you are.
And he talks about the pushback people get, doesn't he? The limiting beliefs.
Oh, yeah. He discusses the limiting beliefs we hold ourselves and also the criticisms people often encounter from friends, family, colleagues when they consider this transition. You know the stuff that's too risky, or why rock the boat? Stick to what you know.
It takes courage to push past that.
It really does.
Yeah.
Overcoming these ingrained beliefs, both internal and external, is a significant part of the journey.
And he emphasizes the importance of financial education or financial IQ. What does that really mean in practical terms? Is it just about spreadsheets?
No, not just spreadsheets, though understanding numbers helps. Financial IQ goes way beyond just knowing how to balance a checkbook. It's about truly understanding the relationship between assets, liabilities, and cash flow.
Okay. Assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take money out.
Basically, yes.
Right.
It's knowing how money comes in, how it goes out, and then strategically making decisions to increase your assets, the things that generate income, and decrease your liabilities, the things that cost you money.
And that ties into his concept of mind your own business.
Exactly. Which, in this context, doesn't mean ignoring others. It means actively focusing on building your asset column.
So your business is your asset column separate from your job.
Correct. Your job gives you income, E quadrant, but your business is the collection of assets you're building, hopefully moving you towards B or I. So instead of just focusing on your salary or professional fees, minding your own business means actively thinking. What other businesses, like investments, rental properties, maybe a side hustle structured as a B, can I build that generate income?
That makes sense. He also talks a lot about the fear of losing money. That's a big hurdle for many people, right? Thinking about investing or starting a business.
Huge hurdle, absolutely. But he points out that people on the right side of the quadrant don't necessarily avoid losing money entirely. That's unrealistic.
They just handle it differently.
They learn to understand and manage the risks involved. They see mistakes or losses not as catastrophic failures, but as learning opportunities. Feedback. Much like an entrepreneur might test multiple versions of a product before finding the one that clicks. Failure is part of the process of learning.
Less emotional about losses, maybe.
They learn to be. He also brings up this interesting idea that relying solely on the perceived security of a paycheck can become a kind of drug.
A drug. How so?
Well, it provides regular comfort, that hit of security, but it can hinder people from seeking out or pursuing opportunities for potentially much greater financial growth and freedom because they're afraid to risk losing that regular paycheck. They become addicted to the safety net.
That's a provocative thought. And it seems like passion plays a significant role too, especially if you're aiming for the B quadrant.
Yes, he definitely emphasizes that. Finding something you're genuinely passionate about can be a powerful motivator, the fuel you need for building and sustaining a thriving business in the B quadrant. It takes a lot of work, and passion helps you push through the tough times.
Right.
Ultimately, he draws this clear distinction between financial security, which might come from a stable E or S position, plus some savings, and true financial freedom.
And freedom is.
Freedom is where your income from your B&I quadrant activities makes work entirely optional. You work because you want to, not because you have to pay the bills.
Okay. So for someone listening who's maybe thinking, wow, this makes sense, I want to explore moving towards the right side, what are some of the key principles or actionable steps Kiyosaki recommends? Where do you even start?
He strongly, strongly advocates for taking baby steps. This isn't about making huge, risky leaps overnight.
Okay, gradual progress.
Yes. It's about gradual progress and the compounding effect of learning and experience over time. Small wins build confidence and knowledge. We've already touched on minding your own business that focus on building assets.
Right. Build that asset column.
He also stresses the critical importance of controlling your cash flow. You have to know where your money is going.
Get a budget, track expenses.
Absolutely. And actively manage your debt. Get rid of consumer debt especially. He even mentions things like the debt snowball method as a practical way to tackle debt and free up cash flow.
So maybe a baby step this week could be just tracking expenses meticulously.
That's a perfect example. Or researching one low-cost index fund if you're currently just in the E quadrant and want to dip your toe into I. Tiny steps.
Right. And he makes that interesting distinction between risk and risky. Can you elaborate on that again? It seems important.
Yes, it's key to his philosophy. He argues that being financially uneducated is actually the riskiest position to be in. Ignorance is risky.
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. The more you understand about how money works, about investing, about business systems, the less risky those activities actually become to you. Financial education transforms perceived risk. It helps you differentiate between a calculated, manageable risk and just a reckless gamble.
So learn more, risk less.
In essence, yes. Education reduces risk. He also encourages you to consciously decide what kind of investor you want to be. Remember those levels.
Yeah, the 5 levels.
Right. He describes different approaches. Some people look for problems they can solve with investments. He calls them a type A or level 5 capitalist. Some look for ready-made answers or packages, type level 3 maybe. And some just want to hand it off to experts, type level 2. He really advocates for becoming a more active, problem-seeking investor who takes responsibility for their own financial education.
Being engaged, not passive.
Definitely engaged. Finding mentors seems to be another crucial piece of advice he offers too.
Learn from people who've done it.
Absolutely. Seeking guidance and learning from individuals who have already achieved the kind of financial success or operate in the quadrant you aspire to, that can be incredibly valuable.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Exactly. They can share their experiences, offer insights, maybe help you avoid some common pitfalls. And finally, maybe a bit more abstractly, he talks about the power of faith.
Faith. In what sense?
Believing in yourself, primarily. Believing in your ability to learn, to grow, to adapt, overcoming those limiting beliefs we talked about earlier, both internal and external, and being really mindful of the negative self-talk or the words you use, things like, I can't afford it versus how can I afford it, that can unconsciously hold you back or sabotage your efforts.
Mindset again.
Yeah.
Keeps coming back to that.
It really does.
And this all ties into his perspective on financial education in today's world, doesn't it? He seems to believe the old rules, just get a job, save money, wait for retirement, they don't really cut it anymore.
That's a core part of his message, yes. He strongly contends that the traditional industrial age advice, get a secure job, work for 40 years, save diligently in a savings account, or maybe a basic pension, that whole model is becoming outdated, even dangerous in our fast-paced information age.
Why outdated? Because of things like inflation, job insecurity.
All of that. Plus, the speed of change, globalization, technology shifts. The idea of lifelong job security with one company is much rarer. And as we discussed, just saving money might mean you're losing purchasing power.
So what's needed instead?
He emphasizes the vital need to understand the fundamentals of how money truly works today, how to make it work for you, and how to invest wisely in this modern economy. You need financial intelligence. He even mentions resources from his own Rich Dad company, like educational courses, coaching, and the cash flow board game.
Oh yeah, the game. I've heard of that.
Right, as practical tools people can use to develop that essential financial intelligence in a safe, simulated environment.
So it's about practice and learning.
Practice, learning, and mindset. Ultimately, he believes that true financial intelligence is as much about cultivating the right mindset, managing fear and greed, developing discipline, thinking long term, and controlling your emotions around money as it is about mastering the technical financial knowledge. The psychology is huge.
Okay, so as we bring this deep dive to a close, let's try and nail down the absolute key takeaways from our exploration of the cash flow quadrant. What should people really walk away with?
Well, I think the most fundamental insight is just recognizing that there are these four distinct ways people generate income, E, S, B, I, and each one is linked to a different core mindset, different values, and offers varying potentials for financial growth and freedom.
Just knowing the map is the first step.
Exactly. Understanding which quadrant, or maybe quadrants you currently operate in, where does your primary income come from? That's the essential first step. Self-awareness.
And then understanding the difference between the left and right sides.
Right. Kiyosaki's framework really highlights that while the left side, employee and self-employed, primarily provides earned income, often trading time for money,
The active income side.
the right side, business owner and investor, offers a clearer, potentially more leveraged pathway to long-term financial independence. This comes through building systems and acquiring income-generating assets, developing a deeper understanding of how money actually functions, passive or portfolio income.
And making that shift, especially from left to right.
Often necessitates that significant shift in your thinking we talked about. It means focusing on actively managing risk rather than just avoiding it, building scalable systems if you're going for B, acquiring assets for I, and committing to continuous financial education. It's a journey, not an overnight switch.
Okay, so for you, the learner listening right now, as you process all this, maybe take a moment to reflect. Which quadrant or quadrants best describe your current income sources? ES. Maybe a bit of both.
And perhaps more importantly, where do you envision yourself ideally operating in the future? Where do you aspire to be?
Maybe those baby steps we talked about, tracking spending, reading a book on investing, researching a franchise, exploring a side business system, and the educational resources mentioned, could be some valuable starting points for your further exploration.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, here's maybe a final thought to consider as you go about your week. Reflecting on the principles we've explored today, what's one small, concrete action, just one you can take this week, to start more actively minding your own financial business?